Oh yeah, it's bank holiday flex. Let's go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2. Check, check. As you can tell, I've opted for wearing headphones this week in an attempt to guarantee that the sound levels are even doper than they ever have been. That's what I'm planning. We'll see about that. And I'm seeing 5 people already in the groups right there. So don't forget, you can leave your comments. I love to respond and be responded to and so forth. But you can also see that I'm not at carnival. Strange, man. I'm not celebrating out and about. I've opted for not going and risking, a 300 or 500 pound stop fine. Knowing my luck, I'd be that one guy at an illegal rave that gets done. So I don't want to get done. You know what I mean? Thank you for the props. I guess I can't see who that is, but I'll look on the Facebook thing. I'm checking out some stuff. It's been an intense week as ever. It doesn't let up. We've had the terrible news about the terrible news and images of Britain First rushing into hotels and looking for migrants. It feels like a serious escalation of things. And Farrakhan's been saying some incredible and interesting revelatory things, I think, as well. But so much has been happening. I've been deep in the cave with editing for the past week, editing this incredible material ahead of, yep, you guessed it, Black Peril. Oh, my mic sounds quiet. How is this possible? All right, I'll be right with you. Yes, that'll be why. But I've been editing furiously and in the cave, as you can tell, not checking out technology and that, editing the incredible footage of the dance, the music that we did whilst on tour up and down the country. So we were in Salford, Hull, Liverpool, Cardiff, London and Newport. And if you're one of the few people I haven't told about this, like, where have you been? It's all happening in just less than 2 weeks. We're going to be broadcasting all of this collated material at Black Peril 2020, first attempt at an online festival. It's going to be really, really exciting. In fact, just to kick off that whole thing, I'm going to show you a little clip of what I've been doing in London, what actually happened, some clips of clips. I'm not going to show you the footage and music I've edited yet. You'll have to wait for that. But here's a little sneak preview of what's to come more broadly. Black African, savage traits, savage mannerism, savage race. Down below, I can't stand your face. Get to rowing, being a galley slaves. Back away, don't have a trace. Just haven't vanished, every man erased or replaced or eradicated. 1, 2, 1, 2. Yo.
wires and wireless chief advisors. Elite assignments, never seen the creep and sneak behind them, and just dreaming of the beast beside them, ports in crisis. Sailors residing beside the sea and never seem to see the wider horizons or even the sea beside them. So row your boats to sow the seeds of violence.
It's good to know about these things. It's ridiculous to find out that they're still putting things up. They're still actually trying to put this in our faces and trying to tell us that we are beneath them.
Yeah, like erasing one story completely and elevating another. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
No, it makes it. They're erecting new monuments to commemorate what the old ones were about. And the old ones were about slavery, slave ships, and
vice.
Oh man, I can't.
So here we are. Yeah, hopefully my sound issues are a little more straight right now. Try to turn things up at this end. Do let me know. I'll crank it up even more. There we go. But as you could see, Jay Phelps, the incredible trumpeter, and myself, a dancer called Theo and Campbell, were out in London, in Docklands, in East London, exploring that history in real time in the streets that saw race riots 100 years ago. There was so much pause and cause for reflection, particularly when we got to West India Dock, and I provocatively left in those images that are adorned all around that site that say rum and sugar and planters, as though nothing went wrong, as though slavery wasn't the underpinnings of the entire economy. So yeah, we've got even more great footage, trust me, coming your way. So much incredible solo performances, ensemble footage, and dance to provoke, to encourage conversation, dialogue, but also catharsis and healing. So I'm going to spend a fair bit of today. I just feel like playing some nonogram material. You know, with such sad news, as I said, around Chadwick, around everything that's happening, all the gaslighting. I felt moved to play some nonogram material, which I haven't done for a while. So hopefully the sound is mint at this point. Please let me know if it ain't. But here we go. Let's start off with some Thank you so much. I feel your energy in the comments. Hold fire. I'm trying to reconnect microphones. Whoa, there we go. Sabotage. Hold on. Not gonna go nowhere. Okay. This is what happens when you have state-of-the-art equipment. Sometimes things go wrong. And sometimes you play with such a storm, such a sweat that everything get mashed up, don't. But without any further ado, I'm going to tidy up the backdrop behind me and get into what's been an incredible discussion. In fact, just give me 1 second. I'll be right with you. Let me see if I can find it. Right, switching cameras. Yeah, I hope you're still with me. I can't get that one off. Good. I'll just leave it. Yeah, so what's happened is I've had the opportunity since starting this Black Peril 2020 festival to connect with so many other kindred spirits. Nobody can hear me, I just know it. 1, 2. Come on. Work with me, baby. There we go. So, as I was saying, smooth. Since I've started the Black Peril 2020 as a festival, I've had the opportunity to connect with so many interesting kindred spirits, people who've both been moved by this under-discussed history, and people who've had a hand in working on projects, being part of organizations that have been involved in celebrating, I guess that's the wrong word, but certainly bringing this incredible 100-year-old history of race riots and the discussion around British identity to the fore. And I got, a chance to meet two such people. The first of these is a woman who began working at Granada Television. You have to be of a certain vintage to remember Granada. So all the whippersnappers in the group probably won't. But in 1982, Vanessa Kirkpatrick, trying to find the little bits of information that we have here on, there we go. Boom. In 1982, began as a presenter, did quite a bit of production work with them, and has encountered what so many black people have within these organizations, and the BBC as well. Some of you might have heard Mervyn, the Bristol mayor, discussing his experiences after David Olusoga brought up at the BBC. So we spoke about not just her experiences, but a project that they did back in 2016 called 1919. I did find some clips of that on YouTube, but it obviously struck a chord because it was another example of a project celebrating and discussing this longer black presence that probably should have got more oxygen at the time, and we had an opportunity to chop it up. But also I was joined in this interview by an incredible filmmaker, Paul Sapin, who's, I don't have a picture of him right here, but his work speaks for itself. You can see he's an acclaimed filmmaker who's done things which I think often speak truth to power. Apparently, Justice is the title of one of his films, an Al Jazeera production, Al Jazeera International, Crude Harvest, and they have both been working on a film most recently which looks at a specific issue of civil rights and police brutality all the way back in the 1960s through the lens of young people who are studying it today. So there are all sorts of interesting threads, common threads between projects they've done in the past and projects they're doing in present, and the idea really of why certain stories are privileged and some are completely obscured and hidden away. So without much more ramblage and sweating and losing of cables and them ting there, I'm going to launch straight into this interview. We began pretty much straight in with me asking Vanessa what was the impetus for her project, which looked at 1919 in particular. And she discussed an encounter with a colleague who said something surprising. So if the conversation starts halfway through, that's the background. Here we go.
History. And what happened was I actually went to see War Horse at Stockport Theatre. It was simulcast with the theatre down in London. And there were some black soldiers on stage. And a woman behind me said, "This is absolute nonsense. There were no black people who served in World War One." And I turned around and looked at her, and she didn't seem in the slightest bit abashed or ashamed by what she'd said.
It reminds me, my brother is an actor, was actually a cast member. So he was the black soldier that you saw in that production of War Horse. If it was
really?
in the past couple of years. And he was in a which celebrated
and I turned around and looked at her, and she didn't seem in the slightest bit abashed or ashamed by what she'd said.
It reminds me, my brother is an actor, was actually a cast member. So he was the black soldier that you saw in that production of War Horse. If it was in the past couple of years. And he was in a which celebrated the contributions of West Indian soldiers to fighting in North Africa in the First World War. So there is a trajectory of like celebrating this history, and the idea that somebody's like, that couldn't have happened, is kind of comical.
That couldn't have happened. And this is precisely what this woman said. I relayed this to Paul. We were wondering what we could do to have a look at, around a project of, of World War One, and Paul quite rightly came up with the theme that actually, we shouldn't be looking at who fought from overseas, but black people who were born and were British citizens. And that's how the riots, actually, the story of the riots came about, because, of course, these young men primarily fought for king and country. When they came back, they were chased out of their homes, out of their digs, out of their jobs, and thrown into the river. I
And
mean, I'm talking primarily about Liverpool, but the stories that we created for the drama.
Hello. I might just interject the odd thing. That photograph that you saw very briefly was of Charles Wooten, and there'll be a lot more coverage, I guess, on him as we start to talk about specific cities in the coming weeks, but I'll let her continue.
And the workshop that we put on was a composite of what happened across many towns and cities.
it's probably worth pointing out that an additional spur for us was this idea that was happening at the time. This was 2016, where there was a lot of conversation about, who's a citizen, who should be considered a citizen, and what should a citizen be. And what they were trying to do was what they usually do when they talk like that, is they're looking to exclude. They're not looking to include, they're looking to exclude. And at the time, like Vanessa and I were talking about earlier today, they take their turns, the state, and they signal out who's to be excluded this time. So it'll sometimes be Asians, it'll be Afro-Caribbean people, and then it'll be refugees, and then it'll be back to Asians again, and then it'll be after. So this was the exclusionary type conversation that was happening across the nation at the time. And once again, the conversation came around to, these are the other, these are not us. And that was an additional spur and inspiration for Vanessa and I to say, that kind of conversation has to end. And instead, we need to kind of show this for what it is.
Yeah.
And these men and women were citizens. If you want to get, on with yourself about that. I believe in the world population. I'm not interested in nation populations, but if you want to get up yourself about all this citizenship stuff, look at the men and women who were citizens here and recognized as such and fought in the First World War and what we did to them.
And also, as you allude to, a lot of these black people were Britishers, in the expression of the time. They called themselves Britishers, which meant there would have been thick Cardiff, Liverpudlian, Hull accents spoke by black people. I think that's pretty mind-blowing. The fact that we often, again, are inculcated to believe that black people just all arrived after the Windrush, which negates a much longer presence going back to the 19th century, 18th century, and even all the way back to Roman times. But how did you, I'm curious about your backgrounds as well, for people that don't know.
My background is primarily Granada television. I did do some work at the BBC, but it was primarily for Granada between 1982 and 2002, and then I did some work at the BBC. I was really excited about the prospect of working for one of the most respected and well-known broadcasters universally. And, I worked very, very hard to get through 2 boards where I believe there were several hundred, if not 1,000 people who'd applied for a position of, I think, 5 positions at Granada. I had credentials, politics graduate, worked on, Nobel Prize and nominated project, consultant to Yorkshire Television for a brief period. And in my first week, and I also had, some great contacts. I mean, unbeknown to me, I didn't know I had supper with somebody who was very well acquainted with the Stasi. So I thought, okay, if I get through to the interview, at least if there's a break in conversation, I've got something to talk about. And then, in the first week, you have these 2 weeks of induction. I'm told that I'm only here because I'm black. And subsequent to that, I was told to stop bringing black stories to the newsroom, to the morning news conference, which completely shook me. I was nonplussed by that. What's a black story? Why does that have any less journalistic integrity than any other story? And gradually, I just realized that, what was most important about my presence there was the color of my skin. And it really troubled people. And I was determined that I was going to subvert the narrative, and I was going to make people sit up and listen. And I think one of the first things I did when I came off screen after having had a heck of a lot of abuse from colleagues, anonymous abuse from colleagues and from crew members and from viewers, I decided I wanted to come off screen and produce and direct. And I submitted a few stories, and my weakest one actually was the one that they accepted. But they probably accepted it because brilliant title, I Didn't Know Black Men Could Fly. And I wanted to look at a story that hadn't been told, and I contacted the RAF archives, spoke to various military people. Oh no, no black people, no black men fought, piloted in World War II. And then I found the wonderful Owen Sylvester, who was living in the shadow of Battersea Power Station. I went down to see him. And that's when I came back with that title, I Didn't Know Black Men Could Fly. I have a passion for this. And recently I've been talking to young journalists, black journalists, who are saying that they're going through the same kind of mental anguish that I went through when I was working in television, because I'm now out of television and say I'm working with Paul on this film. So that is why I think it's really important that we make sure that people are aware of the history. If they're aware of the history, it gives them
be what you can't see. So to have both stories and people in prominent positions within the media is really important for bringing new talent through, new narratives through. And I think one thing that I've certainly seen in all my years working in and out of the media is that the gatekeepers often will employ you for tokenistic reasons. They'll brazenly say stuff like, it's just because you're black that you're working here. And we have to get into positions and sort of affect the channels where these alternative stories and platforms can be given to new narratives, as I mentioned. But
Nayo and
so this is 2016, right? You had Dotun Adebayo,
yeah, yes,
Patricia Kumper, credible dramaturg. So yeah, tell me more about that.
So we had that for a day, and then we brought a group of young actors and also a very experienced DOP together. So the idea was, let's learn how to also film something like this. And so there was a drama.
Yeah, I think the video's skipping a little, but this is the kind of focal point of some of our conversation, where they'd developed a project called 1919, excerpts from this workshop, again celebrating the same presence and looking at the same uncomfortable history. So that gives you some framework. They said they couldn't find it, or didn't give me a link for it on YouTube, but it is there under 1919. You can find it, and I'll probably post a link when I put this up on YouTube. But yeah. And I mean, we were very respectful when I watched. Technology, smology, guys. It's just skipped half of the interview. It's fine. It's fine. World War II. And then I found that I was working in television, because I'm now out of television, and say I'm working with Paul on this film. So that is why I think it's really important that we reluctantly watched it all.
Youth workers.
I'm really sorry.
There you go. My laptop's on bank holiday as well. I mean, we were very respectful of the subject and of our invited guests, who are mainly students who want to work in the media, but also were interested in hidden stories.
Well, we had those, but we also had, I just want to interrupt, we did have, because we made a point of this, that we needed community and youth workers there as well, because so a really, really important thing for us was, again, this is a missing piece of history. And, you know, if we involve teachers, community workers, youth workers, that actually they can help be the deliverers of a lot of this information back into schools, community groups, youth groups, and so forth. So they were, I think, in fact, there were more of them than there were students of film and media.
True enough. But I got funding from Hidden Histories, Jacqueline Jenkinson from, was it Strathclyde University, or was it Glasgow? Strathclyde. She was a consultant to the project.
We'll also be speaking to Jacqueline Jenkinson, author of 1919, Riot 1919, as part of Black Pearl 2020, so shout outs.
Caroline Bressy from University College London, and we had, who was the other chap, Paul? I can't remember, who joined us in the discussions. So, and we wanted to take it further, but unfortunately what happened was that we ran out of time, and this was the best that we could do, but we did a very good job of it, and I think it's on YouTube.
So that, you know, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think there's all kinds of, issues that arise out of that kind of situation. And it involves trauma in some cases, where you have neighborhoods that have been devastated over a period of time, and you have young people who are getting no advantages whatsoever. In fact, they have every conceivable disadvantage thrown at them. And after a while, you know, you just think, well, that's what we are. We're just disadvantaged.
Mm. And Paul was able then as well quickly to segue into a discussion of their new film, which looks, as I said, at this really interesting moment in the 1960s. But there are many, many parallels. The film's called A Few Nagging Questions, and he goes on to describe a little bit more detail here.
You know, it suppresses aspiration, yep, and everything else, and inspiration. And what happened was that when this amazing event that took place, a big shootout between the police and this group of Black nationalists called the New Libyans, was that, you know, it devastated the neighborhood. They stopped all the different programs they had running there, and they basically punished this community for what took place, because it was a shootout with police that uncharacteristically in these situations, right, it was actually the police who did very badly out of it. Mm-hmm. So, wow, you know, it was a very, very important event that absolutely got deep sixed for 50 years. So these young people who lived in the high school only a few blocks away from where this took place, once this story was brought back into their class for the first time, it had an amazing impact. Yeah. Because they were able to see pictures of what their community looked like before this incident took place. They were able to see, they saw footage, because we got hold of archive, of young people their age at the time in
So again, if it's not abundantly clear from Paul's description here, the film that he's putting out now is through the lens, or kind of shot through the perspective of young people today in this community, discovering what their community was like in the late 60s, how much autonomy, how much self-defense, how much protection they had against police brutality and so forth, and it really surprised them and changed them as people. There's a reason why certain stories are suppressed.
1968, who were on the streets demonstrating, who were, you know, Black and proud and beautiful, and it absolutely inspired them incredibly. And what it meant was that
I think there's a real collision in these projects then. The thing that I'm, as you're describing in such detail, the projects, is that this history is not accidentally hidden. These stories are—
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And if
it's
there's the chance that other people can be inspired to be astrophysicists, or at least to question established narratives about the nation state.
Absolutely.
That's actually something that's quite disruptive.
Yeah, so they hate that. Powers that be hate that.
And I think there's something that I've discovered in my research around the Black Peril, and I find it interesting at this particular political moment. It seems when the establishment is about to be found out, for want of a better term, when the privations at the end of war, hunger, housing shortages, disease, the Spanish flu, would make people question those in power and ask, well, can we really believe what they tell us? Someone is around the corner with racism as a solution, sexism and misogyny as a solution, anti-communism as a solution, classism as a solution, so that we're all fighting amongst each other rather than, I guess, the most important prosperous Black communities, these counter narratives in terms of pilots as well. You've got Eugene Bullard, a man who in the First World War not only flew airplanes for America, but was a spy, spied on the Germans. And this is somebody in a narrative that is totally underrepresented.
I mean, hold up. I'm going to interject my own interjection on me. But about Eugene Bullard, what an incredible story. If you get the chance, look it up. Eugene Bullard, Bullard. But he ended his life boxing, playing drums in Paris, was a respected and decorated war veteran of the First World War. And the idea, I mean, great as Red Tails was, that black people just learned to fly in the Second World War is, again, an erroneous, fake news, bad history. Continue.
So there's a sense in which these are deliberately obscured stories.
Yes, it's all deliberate. It's all thought out. It's all worked up, and it is meant to divide us and to keep our attention and our focus away from who is actually responsible, the powers that be that are responsible for bringing this kind of oppression and suppression on folks. So you're absolutely right. I totally agree. It's the same old, same old.
You know, as I've just discovered this history in more detail, there are so many people doing great work in silos. You've got Gaynor Legal in Cardiff and Jamie Baker doing a lot of work on the Welsh riots and race riots in general throughout 1919. Jacqueline Jenkinson, who you've mentioned, Madeline up in Liverpool, and a lot of people that thankfully I'll be speaking to, Nick Evans in Hull. And one thing I'm excited to be able to do is just to connect all of these tendrils and, in a sense, you know, just remind us that we're not working in silos, that actually the way we get more leverage and traction for these stories is to connect with kindred spirits.
That's a really, really important feature to what you're doing, is exactly doing that. Because unless we know, unless we know and we share, right, it continues to remain under wraps, these kinds of stories.
Or it could happen again, you know.
And it can happen again. I think it is happening again.
Yeah, yeah.
We have the same narratives being used on us at the moment. You know, where's the virus? Whose fault is the virus, right? And the gun just keeps switching around. Oh, it's black people, it's Asian people, it's refugees. You know, all that. Same old, same old.
So we don't ask the questions about PPE and adequate test and trace and all of that because we're thinking, Leicester, Indians in sweatshops, black people in dinghies. The dinghies, they're turning up, they're breaking into the country. And we need to, I think, be quite cautious in how we engage with all of that, which is supposed to make us fearful. Also, Vanessa, I know we've both got a bit of a bee in our bonnet about, I think, what gaslighting is happening on television today. You've got the use of the N-word that the BBC reluctantly apologized for. All sorts of subtle things. The Guardian mixed up the photographs of Kano and Stormzy, and then Kano and Wiley, respectively. And we saw what happened with Famalam the other day. So I wonder, you know, is this supposed to just make us irate and we're supposed to be railing against the things? Is it all clickbait? Is that what's happening? Is it algorithms making this happen? Or are people just completely ignorant of their own racism? How did you feel about Famalam Gate?
Famalam Gate, well, I found it jaw-dropping when I watched it. And in fact, when I first saw it referred to on Twitter, I thought this is a spoof. This cannot be for real. And I reluctantly watched it all the way through. And if this is what diversity and inclusion is all about, if that's what, this is clearly what makes the, you know, whoever commissioned it, obviously feels that they've ticked a box. It was outrageous. But as I think it was Nadine White said, the people who took part in that, in those sketches, she says, I hope the trek was worth it. It was absolutely disgraceful. It just took me back to, I don't really want to show my age, but it took me back to Benny Hill and Bernard Manning.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, I didn't mind the accent stuff. Like the Real McCoy did that really well. So many
but the hypersexuality of black men, which keeps, you know, which is
what's the penis got to do with this? You know, it's like,
I know.
Showing all the weird fetishization and dehumanization that's been going on, certainly even before 1919, you know.
I actually made a complaint to the BBC back in November when something similar occurred on the Graham Norton show. And you've got Ricky Gervais and Graham Norton and Kylie Minogue and Elizabeth Banks giggling over a little joke that they made about big black cocks. Yeah. And it was repeated several times. Yeah. I made a complaint. I've not received a response other than, we're rather busy at the moment, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And
my thing is, like, let's talk about it. I mean, it's disgraceful.
I think we should talk about it, yeah.
We can get them to issue a retraction or an apology. I'd be far more interested in saying, Graham, what's your obsession with black penises?
Absolutely.
Well, let's actually have a conversation about it, because the Great Replacement theory, white genocide, the fears of genetic annihilation of white people is sort of this underlying fear, this undercurrent in society. And if we don't talk about it and give it the oxygen of light, then they're going to be able to kind of just burp these involuntary acts of racism without us noticing eventually, you know.
Absolutely. And you see, this is what they will call, either you got a sense of humour bypass, or it's casual racism, or you've got a chip over your shoulder, get over it. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything. Casual racism does not exist. The racism I face virtually every single day that I was at Granada Television for about 20 years did my head in. That is not casual racism. And, you know, and we've now called it something else. They come out with their white handkerchiefs, unconscious bias. No.
I had no idea I was being racist.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And when you refer to the, I'm going to say the nigger word. I know that Paul, I don't think Paul agrees with me on this, but the argument against using that word is that if you use it, you're normalizing it. Excuse me, it's been normalized for at least 64 years of my life. My father, who worked in the States as a teenager and would send money back to his parents in Jamaica, he was told, we don't serve niggers here. He wasn't told, we don't serve the N-word here. You've got to tell it like it is. Otherwise, you're just sanitizing it.
Yeah, I agree.
You're sanitizing the experience.
And it's the same with the statues and all of that. We need to keep a record of it. But it's kind of similar to that in that regard. Sure, we can keep the knowledge of the history and those barbarians, those pirates that kidnapped us hundreds of years ago. Maybe don't put them on a plinth. Maybe don't educate them so they're sort of revealed.
Take them off plinths.
You know, and with reference to the BBC, well, let's be honest. What I saw, the clip of it, it's like there's a titillation, there's an enjoyment of, well, this is the context, so I'm able to say it.
I didn't hear that. What did you just say? So
in the context in which the BBC had used the N-word a couple of times a week, there seems to be an almost, titillating, just an enjoyment, a real sort of pleasure, sick pleasure that people gain in having the parameters around and say, oh, this is historically contextual and I can say it. Yippee! I can say it. And it's not so much that this word didn't exist, it's that, well, why are people getting off on it? I've only got less than a minute left of it, but where can people find you and find this work that you're doing in 30 seconds?
The film, A Few Nagging Questions, is actually got its own Facebook page, so it's there. And as far as the 1919 stuff, I think Vanessa's like the best guide for that, but I think we can send you some links for that. And listen, we're really, really enthusiastic and pleased about what you're doing with this historical period. It's fantastic. It's really great.
Yeah, all absolutely. Will you keep us up to date with what you're doing?
Of course. And keep spreading the word.
And we should speak again. Okay.
No doubt. Boom. Thank you so much to Vanessa and for Paul for joining me for that conversation. One of the things that's so powerful is that in talking with other people about similar projects, you know, similar, connected, if slightly different, it clarifies the reasons that Black Peril 2020 is still relevant, is still resonant, why those conversations need to be had, and as I said in the interview, to connect with like minds. Something that Farrakhan said in his recent speech, it's like magma bubbling up from underneath this next moment. And there are people, when we air grievances about working at Granada TV or on Ryanair or something that could seem quite frivolous and middle class, well, there's a sort of impatience now with increased police brutality, continued murders, with alt-right killers of people just protesting, white people getting shot, killed up in this mix. When we start to realize how interleaved all these stories are, when we really start to appreciate what intersectionality means for us practically, some big differences are about to happen. But I've been talking too much. I want to play some saxophone, that's why I'm here. It's bank holiday. Chill out now, people. Relax now. All right. I hope that it's one of think I might leave you with this number right here. I love playing this song. It's been so long since I have with an audience. You know, like in the St. John audience. I love you guys. But we're gonna need to get back to real carnivals and entertainment kind of soon. This is called Montpellier. And I exhort you, I implore you to shake your booties. It's Bank Holiday Monday night. And if you're at home or somewhere else, you can still boogie. You know what I mean? Okay, this is definitely going to be the last one. I'm having way too much fun. Oh, I see there's a message, which I can't read right now. But I'm going to end with a dedication to Chadwick. This is really sad when powerful, iconic black brothers pass long before their time, way too soon. I'm going to say too much about this, but this is also dedicated to a very dear friend of mine who passed away in 2016. So this is called At Peace. We're going to end it here. Come on now. Hey, there we go. sisters, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of this bank holiday. Stay safe. Stay alert. God bless you. And see you soon. Thank you very much.